We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest with Safe Tennessee Project, the executive director, is Beth Joslin Roth. And taking your phone calls for Beth. We've got some that are waited through the break as we talk just about some of these shootings and some of maybe the approach to looking at how these occur and how we can stop them from happening. It's just a tough issue. Let's go to start things off with, let's see, Brian. Brian, good morning.
Yes, I lived in Nashville for about the last dozen years or so. I moved out to the country several years ago, but then before that, Southern Illinois and Chicago for 10 years and 12 years. Now, Southern Illinois is not different than Chicago. Chicago, you can't even have a gun until a few years ago, and everybody has one.
Yeah.
Under the collar. And Southern Illinois is like, you can have them, but it's like people don't want them. And in Tennessee, you go down by a river with your target pursuit, shoot at beer cans and stuff, and it's different. I don't know where I'm going with this, but you got to look at. I'm not too thrilled with the saying guns don't kill people, people kill. No wait, people don't. What's the saying? Guns don't kill people. People kill people, or something. But you got to look at the philosophy of the gun itself, all the way back in history. It's just like the gun in and of itself is the symbolism of like the person or the army or we didn't have police for a long time in the history of the world, but the guns are just a strange thing if you think about it, philosophically. But you got to have deer hunters like for hunting. So the deer rifle is an excellent weapon. The AR-15 is, unless it's a very expensive model, is actually pretty crappy. They make a lot of crappy ones.
Do you think the AR-15 is used for hunting much? I mean, I wonder, there may be some people that use it to hunt. I don't know.
The people I know who hunt do not use AR-15s, and in fact they say that if you need an AR-15 to hunt, then you need to get on the range and practice your target shooting more, for lots of reasons. Number one being that it's really more firepower than you need for hunting, but also just the damage that it does to
you'll tear up the meat more, and so
yes.
You're hunting, hopefully, I assume, for meat, and you want to put it in your freezer, and AR-15 round does more damage than maybe, and I'm no expert on this, folks, but than maybe one of the hunting rifles.
Right. Now, I do know that in there are certain areas where there are, I've been told, wild boars, and they are sometimes hard to take down with standard hunting rifles. So some people will say that AR-15s are the best, or weapons like that are the best for boar hunting. But for your basic deer hunting and things like that we mostly see in Tennessee, AR-15 is not the weapon of choice.
All right, let's go to Joe. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Joe.
One of the things that you already addressed somewhat is every state has different laws. We need to have a federal law that's the same in every state. That would eliminate a lot of this stuff. And who is going to determine how many people and who is mentally ill?
I know, that's hard, isn't it? Well, like she said, it would be a judge, and there would be circumstances that land you in front of a court for maybe things that you do, because there's always red flags before some of these shootings happen,
In every case, there's been red flags. Many of them and even in this case, this guy was clearly, coming and going. Sometimes he was illiterate, sometimes he was acting crazy. So.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to me like he may be someone who's bipolar schizophrenic where he has episodes. Now, we'll see how his legal defense team goes. But, people like me and Joe see these after the fact, and ordinary individuals like us who aren't around these people don't know. But we know his family was aware of the fact that he had threatened suicide in the past. They had actually called and been worried about him being out with a gun, maybe harming himself. And yet still, after that incident at the White House, the gun was returned to him. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing. You were telling me before the show, you've seen other cases too, where for whatever reason the parents, and I know most parents in their wildest dreams don't want to imagine that their son or daughter is a mass murderer, and so they return them. And so I have some sympathy for parents when they just don't think so. Parents never think, oh no, not my kid. Well, yeah, it could be your kid.
I think there's a tendency, I mean, as parents, I think there can be a tendency sometimes to be in denial about what's going on with your child, whether your child's suffering, you know, from a learning disability or a mental illness. You want to pretend that it's not there and ignore it. But as you brought up, you know, we have seen this time and time again. We saw it with the Sandy Hook shooter. We saw it with the Parkland shooter. We saw it with the Umpqua Community College shooter a couple of years ago, where you have these adult, young adult sons whose parents are fully aware of some concerning behavior, some visible instability being exhibited, but for reasons that are really baffling, choose to give them guns, give them access to guns, and encourage them to use guns. And unfortunately, that often ends badly.
You know, these shootings are a uniquely male venue. I mean, that's the other thing. You want to stop mass shootings, keep guns out of the hands of men. Huh? Everyone's like, what are you talking about? Of course not. And
You
I'm
said
a guy.
that, I didn't say that.
I'm a guy, and I know. But I mean, I only bring that up because can you name to me a few of these mass shooters that were female? And I'm sure there have been a couple. But honestly, what do the statistics show when it comes down to mass shootings and male or female?
It's very, very rare. I can't think of any females off the top of my head. Again, not to say that they don't exist. I'm sure you could Google and find one, but it's very rare. And even
it is men.
It's primarily men. And
testosterone, mental illness, insecurities, masculinity, all that crap mixed together, and then throw guns in there, and you've got people getting murdered.
Well, and what we know just from the research is that there are things that are predictors, certain behaviors that we have seen in the past with some of these individuals. You know, a history of anger management, an inability to resolve conflict effectively, substance abuse, alcohol abuse, domestic violence, or problems with women. What we see in many of these cases are histories that are similar to one another. So that's, you know, when we're doing this type of work that I do and working with researchers, you know, what you're trying to do is figure out some common denominators so that you can better identify kind of a profile and then sort of create policies to sort of help give tools to families and law enforcement so that they can intervene. For example, gun violence restraining orders is something that we support. It's something that after Parkland, a lot of people were talking about, including Marco Rubio, and even Vice President Pence brought it up. But what a gun violence restraining order does is it would give a family member or a member of law enforcement the ability to petition a judge if they believe that someone is an imminent danger to themselves or others. They would go before the judge, they would make their case, and the judge would make a determination whether or not to temporarily remove firearms from someone's possession. Because, you know, what people don't always understand is that even if a member of law enforcement has an encounter with somebody that they feel is exhibiting concerning behavior, and they know they have firearms, the way our law is right now in Tennessee, there's nothing that law enforcement can do until that person is committing a crime.
Right.
And there's also not anything that a family member could do. So if you had a brother or a father, somebody that was close to you, and they were saying things that made you concerned about them, that they might take their own life, or maybe that they might be considering harming a former employer or former, you know, romantic partner, as it is now, there's not anything that you would be able to do in that situation. So what a gun violence restraining order does is it would provide sort of a tool, an intervention tool to family members and to law enforcement to hopefully be able to prevent a tragedy, whether it's a suicide or whether it's a mass shooting or something in between.
Okay. And in general, are there opponents that just object to that? On what grounds? Just saying that it...
You know, there are people that would say, you know, that feel very threatened by any type of talk of removing guns from people.
Because they worry that maybe, yes, for someone really crazy, but not me. And they worry they could come back on them. And,
well, and
the criteria has to be very clear.
It does. And the thing that's important to point out when you're talking about something like a gun violence restraining order is, you know, there is due process. This isn't just me deciding that, you know, I'm mad at my brother and I'm going to take his guns away. I mean, it involves going in front of a judge, the judge making a determination. So there are a lot of safeguards involved in that process. It's not really that dissimilar to the process that we use for orders of protection.
As it is now, the judge has to feel some evidence, and he won't or she won't always grant that order.
Right.
So, okay.
Exactly.
Let's go to Greg. Hi, Greg.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Greg. What's on your mind?
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate that this morning.
Sure.
So you talk about the gun violence and the guns are the problems, but I've got 19 years experience working in a healthcare facility, and I see mentally disturbed individuals on a daily basis. I think our issue is, I think everybody agrees, is mental health.
Well, yeah, that's what we've been talking about this morning, really. We haven't been focusing as much on the guns as the guns getting into the hands of those who are mentally ill.
Exactly. We see mentally health individuals on a daily basis, 7, 8, 10 a day, per day, every day, 7 days a week. We see them go to these other states and stay one day, if one day, 3 days at the most, and they're right back out. It's a revolving door.
Yeah, there's no beds for mental health treatment. The Sheriff Hall will talk about that. But keep in mind, not all folks, obviously, the very small minority of mentally ill are actually violent. They have other issues.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Correct.
So, I mean, it's just, if you're mentally ill, it doesn't mean you're going to be violent, but that's a flag, potentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I hear exactly what he's saying. I mean, and we got to take a break, but Sheriff Darren Hall, who I have a lot of respect for, comes on this show, is, you know, they're building this new jail. And this new jail, he made sure, is going to have a section in it with beds for mental health treatment. He goes, and our caller just now, Greg's right on the money. The mentally ill, there are no beds for treatment. It just doesn't exist anymore. The institutions of the past, which some people said, those were good in a lot of ways. Because there's a place to send people. Now, you get arrested because you're out of your loop, you're in the jail, getting no help at all. We'll take a break on that. When we come back, look at all these phone calls for you. How about that? We'll get to a bunch of phone calls as we talk more about these shootings right after this.
The Storm